So in a parable known as the Sword of Damocles, a courtier extols the riches and luck of his ruler, who responds by offering to exchange places for a day. Damocles sits on the throne, enjoying a feast, wine, lavish surroundings, and unending entertainment. But at the end of the day, he glances up and notices a sword dangling by a single thread above his head. Terrified, he leaps off the throne and offers it back to the ruler. Now, this story is used to illustrate the peril of positions of power, but I also think it's an apt metaphor for the fragility of good fortune. We are all subject to life's vicissitudes, and sudden illness, the job layoff, or death of a loved one can upend our contentment. And so, are we captives of fortune? Just sort of dependent on the avoidance of bad happenstance? Well, having majored in English in college, I always look to classic literature for the answers to life's tough questions. Usually that means the dweems, dead white European males. Dweem wisdom always starts in ancient Greece, where Sophocles had the chorus in Oedipus say, "Count no man happy till he passed through life unscathed." Now, I read that play in high school, and that sort of went along with my attitude at the time. Growing up, my mom had a phrase, "ruined for life," which she would exclaim for catastrophes ranging from a scrape that might scar to a cousin who became pregnant as a teenager. The message was clear. A happy life depended on the avoidance of bad fortune. Some of our Western cultural and religious traditions even take this a step further, considering bad luck to be punishment for some sort of immoral behavior. But several centuries after Sophocles, another dweem recognized that avoiding bad circumstances was not so easy, and Shakespeare had Hamlet soliloquize about the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune to which we are all subject. Fast forward a few more centuries, and Hemingway noted that these negative experiences were both inevitable and potentially beneficial, writing, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, some are strong at the broken places." Now, the concept of strength through adversity is not unique to Hemingway, but in Hemingway's version, it is some, not all, who are stronger at the broken places. And so it seems that the challenge is how to become one of those made stronger by adversity, rather than weaker or destroyed. A member of this congregation once told me a story about two Holocaust survivors he had known years before when he lived in New York. Both bore ID tattoos, had lost their entire families in concentration camps, and had suffered unimaginable horrors. The first one, a kind and soft-spoken teacher, was motivated by the experience to pursue a life of service to others. The second, a tailor, had become jaded and bitter and said that the experience had motivated him not to trust anyone he met. Now, most of us would prefer to be described as kind rather than bitter, but how do we behave when we believe we've been treated unfairly, when a relationship ends, we're passed over for a job promotion, our child is hurt by another child? Do our egos tell us that a strong reaction is to yell at someone or have a similarly aggressive response? If you look up synonyms for strength, you might see words like sturdiness, vitality, power, not softness, gentleness, flexibility. But it's important to explore our prejudices about what constitutes strength. And here I'll segue to an anecdote from my world, the world of medicine. Osteoporosis is a chronic disease that can lead to fractures that cause both pain and deformity. Years before Sally Field was on TV hawking the latest drug to treat the condition, the standard treatment was fluoride. Several medical papers in the 1980s touted the improved bone density in patients treated with fluoride. But after long-term use, the patients who were treated with fluoride actually suffered more fractures, not less. It seems that while the fluoride had built bone, the bone was brittle and therefore susceptible to breaking. Like the tailor, the bone had become harder, but not stronger. A friend of mine who's a poet thinks we're like this too. He's written poems about his marriage, his struggles with alcohol, and I asked him once how he is so self-revealing with strangers. He said, vulnerability is strength in my worldview, which is a sentiment I can agree with in theory, but maybe like some of you, it doesn't come so easy to me. It was a few years ago that I first heard myself described as intimidating, and I have to say, I kind of liked the sound of that. Because when you grow up female and petite and quiet, you don't ever feel intimidating. I certainly didn't think softness or gentleness were traits that I needed to work on trying to project. But intimidated is not how people like to feel. And Maya Angelou was right when she said that people will forget what you say and do, but not how you make them feel. It occurred to me that cultivating more kindness and gentleness was indeed something I should aspire to. And fortunately, I had a great role model. Those of you who know my husband know that he is a paragon of gentle, non-intimidating strength. When I was dating him as a young medical student, he used to say to me the night before a big exam to remember, not everything is on the line. Now, when you've been working your whole life toward a goal that could easily be derailed by a single failed exam, it very much feels like everything is on the line. But by reminding me that his feelings for me did not depend on test performance, he gave me the confidence of a soft place to land in case I should stumble. 4 months before a wedding we had been planning for over a year, Dan was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, a disease his father had died of just a few years before, and life was turned upside down. The textbooks at the time listed a 50% 5-year survival. And when you're in your 20s, 5 years doesn't sound much like survival. Because of that experience, I know that my patients who have had cancer, when they have any minor symptom, they're worried that the cancer is back. And I can speak to those fears. I know that the relatives in the room with them are struggling just as much to cope as the person with the diagnosis. And I know that I'm a more compassionate physician because of the experience I had. But even years after Dan's cancer, I still felt like Damocles on the throne, terrified of recurrence, waiting for that sword to drop. And in the 2 decades that I've been dealing with that fear, which can feel like a prison, I've learned a few things. The first is that my mother was wrong. Happiness does not depend on avoiding the bad things in life. It's recognizing that every life, no matter how great it looks on Facebook or Instagram, has both good and bad, and neither is a permanent state. Next is that there's not always someone to blame. How indignant we all become when things don't go our way, and we look for someone to be at fault. And when there's no one, the blame often turns inward, and we criticize ourselves, feel unworthy, succumb to negative self-talk. Why can't we just accept that bad times are a fundamental part of the human experience? Finally, a thing to remember when we deal with hard times is that no matter how bad things are, others have felt this way too. That realization breaks us out of why me mode and helps us feel a deep kinship with others. Buddhist nun Pema Chodron writes, "When my second marriage fell apart, I tasted the rawness of grief, the utter groundlessness of sorrow, and all the protective shields I had always managed to keep in place fell to pieces. To my surprise, along with the pain, I also felt an uncontrived tenderness for other people. I remember the complete openness and gentleness I felt for those I met briefly in the post office or at the grocery store. I found myself approaching the people I encountered as just like me, fully alive, fully capable of meanness and kindness, of stumbling and falling down, and of standing up again. I'd never before experienced that much intimacy with unknown people. I could look into the eyes of store clerks and car mechanics, beggars and children, and feel our sameness. Somehow, when my heart broke, the qualities of natural warmth, qualities like kindness and empathy and appreciation, just spontaneously emerged." Pentimenti are visible traces of an earlier painting, which can sometimes show through the top layers of paint in a finished work of art. We too have pentimenti, traces of our past, which show through our current selves. It seems to me that the best way to live is so that the pentimenti in our self-portrait say to those around us, "Run fast and fly high, knowing that if you fall, with me, you will always have a soft place to land." May it be so.
Hello, yes. So we were going to play a song, and I don't think we have it. Do we, Jim? No. Okay. So I wanted to read you the text, because I think it's a beautiful song, and I won't sing it because I'm not like Kelly. I wish I could sing it to you because it's really beautiful. And I want to read you the text, and then I encourage you to go to the internet and look up Peter Mayer. He's a Unitarian Universalist minister, and he wrote this song about Japanese bowls. And I'll hope that I can get through it without crying, because it always makes me cry. Japanese bowls. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls that were made long ago. I have some cracks in me. They have been filled with gold. That's what they used back then. When they had a bowl to mend, it did not hide the cracks. It made them shine instead. Sorry. So, now every old scar shows from every time I broke, and anyone's eyes can see I'm not what I used to be. But in a collector's mind, all of these jagged lines make me more beautiful and worth a much higher price. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls. I was made long ago. I have some cracks you can see. See how they shine of gold.